that I wrote this morning over at HartmannReport.com, which is, typically my opening rant for the program, is titled, "The 9/11 attack wasn't an act of war, it was a crime." And I realize that this is semantics, right? It's semantics, discussion of language. This is, what does a word mean? But in this case, the meaning of words has led, or the misuse of the meaning of words has led to at least 500,000 deaths in Afghanistan and Iraq, perhaps well over 1 million. Certainly, tens of millions of people having their lives turned upside down, being displaced, becoming homeless, becoming refugees, and thousands of American deaths. So the point that and I made it briefly yesterday, but I really wanted to amplify it today. In fact, I think yesterday when I mentioned it, I said, my yesterday's rant was about why Bush wanted to have his wars. And then I said, they're not even really wars; they're occupations. So there's two very important definitions that if we don't get right for the historical record and for this moment about Afghanistan and Iraq and frankly Vietnam as well, if we don't get these things right, we will be doomed to repeat them. The old saying that those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. We don't want to repeat this history. So let's just be very, very clear. When 9/11 happened, we were attacked by a small group of right-wing terrorists, right-wing Muslim terrorists, who were using Islam as their rationale for attacking us, in part. And that was Osama bin Laden and Sheikh Khalid Mohammed and Mohammed Atta, who died in one of the planes. Sheikh Khalid Mohammed was actually the guy who did the operational planning. He did it out of Peshawar, out of Pakistan, not Afghanistan. The government of Afghanistan had no idea this was going on or coming. It wasn't even planned in Afghanistan. It was planned in Pakistan, in Florida, and in Germany by Mohammed Atta and Sheikh Khalid Mohammed, and there's a couple others who were involved. And we've had these guys in Gitmo for years. Atta's dead, but we've had Sheikh Khalid Mohammed in Gitmo since 2003. We're still trying to try him because the court has now said because we tortured him, his confessions can't be used. But we know what happened here. So we had a crime. But George W. Bush wanted to be a wartime president. He wanted to have the powers that go along with a war. And, his father fought in World War II. His father was part of that generation. And so he very much wanted to be able to say, like Franklin Roosevelt said back in the day, the way that Roosevelt responded to the Pearl Harbor. This is Franklin Roosevelt.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
And that's pretty important, the Empire of Japan part of it, because, that's what happened. We were attacked by a sovereign nation, Japan, by their military. Their people were all in, their emperor was all in, their leader was all in. We were attacked by another country. And so FDR went to Congress and said, I want a war declaration, and Congress said, you've got it, buddy. And the Constitution says that only Congress can declare war. And there's a reason for that. James Madison laid it out. This is what Madison wrote. He said, in no part of the father of the Constitution, he said, in no part of the Constitution is more wisdom to be found than in the clause which confides the question of war or peace to the legislature and not to the executive department. In other words, not to the president. President cannot make war. He goes on to say, because the objection to such a mixture of heterogeneous power, the trust and the temptation would be too great for any one man. War is, in fact, the true nurse of executive aggrandizement. In war, a physical force is to be created, and it is the executive, the president, who will direct it. In war, the public treasuries are to be unlocked, and it is the executive hand which dispenses them. In war, the honors and emoluments of office are multiplied, and it is the executive, the president's patronage under which they are to be enjoyed. It is in war, finally, that laurels are to be gathered, and it is the executive brow that they encircle. The strongest passions, the most dangerous weaknesses of the human breast, ambition, vanity, the honorable or venal love of fame, are all in conspiracy against the desire and duty of peace. End of quote from James Madison. This is why we did not give war-making powers to the president in the Constitution. It is solely with Congress. Bush wanted a war. He went to Congress, but he couldn't ask for a war declaration because we weren't attacked by another country. So he asked for an authorization to use military force to specifically go after bin Laden. We took down the Taliban government. It took a couple of weeks. And now to definition number two. Now, definition number one, 9/11 was not an act of war. It was a crime. A horrible, horrific, mind-boggling, obscene, 3,000 dead people crime. But it was a crime by a group of criminals, not by another country. Number two, we did have a war. It wasn't declared against us by any other nation, but we declared war on two countries, using 9/11 as the pretext, Afghanistan and Iraq. And both of those wars ended in about a month. Both of them. We took down the Taliban government in about 3.5 weeks. We took down the Iraqi government in around 5 weeks, as I recall. Both of them in the neighborhood of a month. And that was when both wars ended. And what began was then an occupation for the next 20 years. Now, people will say, but wait a minute, people are still shooting at us. Yes, that happens in occupations. But occupations never end well. They just don't. I mean, ask the British about, their occupation of this continent in 1776. Ask the British about their occupation of India right up until 1947. People do not like their country being occupied by a foreign power. And bin Laden desperately needed George W. Bush to overreact and essentially, bomb some other country, rather than unite the police forces of the world, which is what many European nations were calling for. Let's use Interpol and get this guy. Or negotiate with the Taliban and get him. And the Taliban reached out repeatedly to the United States saying, we're ready to work with you to get bin Laden. And Bush was like, no, I want to have a war. I want to be a wartime president. For all the reasons that James Madison laid out. Bottom line, and I've been saying this for a while. I said it this morning in my rant over at HartmannReport.com, and I think it's really important. Far more deaths happened on both sides than would have happened if we had simply cooperated with the international community and done whatever was necessary to take out bin Laden. There might not have been one single American death. There might have only been a few dozen Afghan deaths or what. I mean, we would have had to have Pakistan collaborate with us, because both Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Osama bin Laden at the time of 9/11 were in Pakistan. They weren't even in Afghanistan. And like I said, the major planning for this took place in Venice, Florida, and in Germany, in Hamburg. But we're not going to bomb Florida. We're not going to bomb Germany. We're not going to bomb Pakistan. So who's left? Well, how about a country that doesn't even have an air force? They're so poor, the average income in the country is $2 a day. Let's bomb that country, the second poorest country in the world. You see, reality is important. Language is important. It's important that we be precise and clear about these things so that we don't make these stupid mistakes again. Or that we don't, I'm not even sure you can call it a mistake, so that we don't allow a future president to lie us into another unnecessary war in response to something that was basically a crime.